Lolma, hello. My name is Clark Tenakhongva, and I'm a member of the Hopi tribe. I am from the village of Hopevilla on Third Mesa. There are 12 villages out here on the Hopi reservation, and I belong to the Rabbit and Tobacco clan here on the Hopi reservation. Currently, I reside at First Mesa with my family in Palaka. That's it. The subject area I'm going to be talking about is titled in our language Tananwani, which is our agriculture, our seeds, and how we today generally do our farming here on Hopi. The first part of it I will talk about is the origin of the seeds. It's a short glimpse I'll give you about is that we believe as when we emerged here to what is called the fourth world of the Hopi, the creator gave us a ear of corn, short ear blue ear of corn, which we have sustained or carried up from since time immemorial, the time of emergence of Hopi from the Grand Canyon to presently where we reside at. And that's what we believe we carried that corn throughout our whole lifetime, and that is presently one of the main seeds that we have. We plant a variety of seeds. We plant about maybe 8 different types of seeds of corn, and also quite a number of seeds of beans that we grow out here. Along with that, we have the squash that is grown, and those are the what we call the heirloom seeds that have been with Hopi for a long, long time, and they're adapted especially to this environment. We reside on a semi-arid desert area, and we're at elevation from about 6,000 to the highest point of I think it was 6,700 feet. So it's pretty dry up here. Average moisture is less than 5 inches of moisture that we get, but everything that we do with the seeds is dependent on moisture that we receive in the form of rains. We don't have any uh, real sustainable irrigation that we do with the seeds at this point. So that's how we have a lot of seeds that we plant here, and it can vary from one farmer to the next farmer. What are his favorite seeds that he or she that would like to farm those seeds? And right now, I'm saying it's primarily the role of the male, but it also females have little plots out here which they usually either garden or they actually have a whole big couple acre field that they will plant. So this is the seeds that we have planted throughout a long time that has sustained us up to today. Again, the heirloom seeds, what I mentioned earlier in the program, was about the seeds that we have maintained throughout our historical life of Hopi. Corn is something that's very valuable to Hopi, and that is something that the depth of the corn is usually planted anywhere from 10 inches up to a foot deep or even more, depending on the moisture content of the soil content. Also, sometimes it's in loamy soil or maybe it might be in clay content land that you would be planting the seeds in. Um, there is a special kind of corn which we call the Hopi sweet corn, very small in ears, but yet it's very uh, high content in as far as what we utilize that for in food wise and ceremonial wise. All the seeds of the corn is used in everyday life or with the ceremonial part. But the early part of the sweet corn we plant is in like around April, first part of May, because the maturity level by the time it matures should be about the end of July and used for a number of various specific ceremonial uses. The other corn that we plant is usually starting in about mid-May all the way up until maybe the first week of in June because that's still where the moisture is still within the sometimes in the ground. Depending on how much moisture we receive throughout the winter months, hopefully we get a lot of snow or rain in the spring months. that it can be, soil is healthy enough to sustain these seeds. And that's how we have educated or learned throughout the years of the adaptation of the various corn seeds that can reach maturity at by October, because we want it to be fully mature, dry on the husk, meaning the husk is dried, the corn is mature. That way, when we harvest, and it stays fully intact for storage later on into the years or year that we can use it. So that is the goal of the farmer that wants to do that. Now the beans, usually we plant anywhere from uh, 3 to 4 inches in depth, because again, beans are something that cannot go like how the corn plants are. The corn is usually pointed up with the leaf structure so that it can penetrate through the ground, as far as depending on if it's dry or wet. But the beans, as some of you may be aware of, it has round leaves, so it doesn't have that kind of ability to lift up to go penetrate through the ground, but rather lift up the whole soil content, and throughout my experience of what I see. So sometimes in this case, if the plants do not make it up to the top level and it starts lifting up, then I have to go through and break up the soil or the ground that may have been dried, and to allow the plants to come through. The trickiest ones are usually the pumpkins or the squash, because they have little round leaves also too, but yet those are the ones that you would only plant like at an inch depth, like modern farming, I guess, not Hopi style, but everything is dry farming, so you have to do it at the early stage where the soil is still wet. But for the corn, the spacing is usually 4 paces, one plant to the next, because the roots of the Hopi corn go all the way down anywhere from a foot to foot and a half deep, so that they can maintain that moisture to get it to that maturity level. So the root base of the corn is very deep compared to a non-Hopi type of farming corn, like say a sweet corn that's been produced by a farmer in Iowa or such other places. And the other part is that they have the ability to irrigate, whereas Hopi does not have that. But they do irrigate in some small terrace gardens around the springs, where they do sometimes irrigate from the spring water, and that is usually maintained a lot of times, which I mentioned earlier, by the females who have the green thumb to be able to grow like other vegetables within their little garden areas there at the spring areas. One of the areas that's very well noted is in Third Mesa at Hopevilla, that they have spring gardens that are still in existence all the way from the era of when they first came there in the early 1900s. There's other gardens throughout Hopi. Another one is in Whippo up in First Mesa, where they still plant today the various types of beans and corn that have been adapted to that kind of irrigation system. But 90% of Hopi seeds are mainly utilized to be planted in the big fields that are dry farming. None of that is irrigated, because, like I said earlier, is that it depends on how much moisture we get receiving, but maybe midway from June all the way through August, which is usually the monsoon type of the season during that month. Then after that, then once they mature, then that's the height of the season where we start eating from the fields. Is like late August, early into September. We uh, have the fresh crops that was brought in, like the fresh corn on the cob, the tamales, the fresh pickings of string beans and others, the squash and the pumpkins that come in. And so that is what they call the harvest height of the moon, that we have the delicacies that come in with the Hopi variety seeds that we have planted. So we now talk about the Hopi heirloom seeds. By definition, if you looked into the Webster's dictionary, heirloom is something that's been maintained or in custody of a group of people or family or one individual for a very long time. we believe that, excuse me, the heirloom seeds that's been here with Hopi has been here since time immemorial. Like I said, at the time that we were allowed to walk this planet from the Creator, He gave us an ear of corn. And so since that time, Hopi has maintained the consistency of the seeds, that primarily the corn. And as we traveled the earth, we got introduced to other varieties of seeds, which is the beans, the squash, and other varieties that were here with Hopi and still maintained here. So a lot of the custody of the corn that we have here today is within families, within clans, or with individuals. But as far as Hopi teachings go, is that once the Hopi, the corn is reached maturity and it's harvested, it then becomes the custody of the women. It becomes the ownership of the women, because Hopi looks at corn as being also their children that you have, like again, as a farmer like myself, I would have planted in May. I maintained the field. I watched the plants as they matured to the level of where they became fully mature, to where the corn is hardened. And when you harvest the corn, you bring it home to your wife or your clan relatives or your sister or other people. They then, the females, take each one of the ears of corn, maintain those carefully, put it out to dry, and once it is at that level where they see it as being dried, then it's carefully placed in homes or in storage units where it's maintained for a year or years. So that is how the chain of custody usually takes place. The same goes for the other seeds. You've got the beans that is also stored in special places. Beans that we have maintained through all these years. Squashes are something. Pumpkins are the same way. Once it's harvested or it's consumed or eaten, going to be prepared for meals, a lot of the seeds are still taken out, dried, and then stored for the next year. And so when it gets time to, again, like say in April and May, the men folks would then ask their wives or their relatives, say, can you start preparing the seeds? Some of the custody of the seeds, the women know, the ones that are at real good full maturity and have that sturdiness within you can look at the like say a cob of corn. As a whole cob, the woman would then store those special corn, ears of corn, that is going to be planted for next year. So when the husband, or like say if I didn't have a wife or I just had a mother, I would ask my mom, could you prepare the seeds? The seeds are then shelled by the wife or the daughter or the sisters or relatives in this case. They prepare them in a special way, given the blessings, and then given to the men folks. And then you would take it out to the fields and then start planting the seeds wherever you feel that it's going to best produce, be productive. So throughout my education or knowledge or teachings of the various seeds, I find that the watermelon, pumpkin seeds are best grown in the loamy soils that are out here in our area. It's the sandy areas where they may seem to mature and really give you the best product. The beans also can be very particular in some areas as far as how you and where you plant. So beans I never ever plant in a clay-based content of land. A lot of the farmers have found that it's best grown in little wash areas where there's a little bit of sand that's mixed in with the clay content of the washes. Again, like I said, it's hard for a bean to sprout because if it's clay, it's hard for it to push it up. Whereas with the corn, it can grow in both the loamy, the sandy soils, or within the clay base. And I find that because I plant in an area currently right now that has about 80% clay, that if it's a good year where there's good moisture, I will harvest corn that may be up to 14 to 16 inches long in ear, and that's just through dry farming. And last year, I was very fortunate where some of the stalks got up to 8 to 10 feet tall, and I was teasing other people that had came from various parts of the nation. And I told this one gentleman, he said he's a farmer, and I says, not only in Iowa do you grow Iowa corn, but in Hopi we do grow Iowa corn out here. And he had to come out to our field to be a believer that there is such corn that can grow out here in arid desert like this way. But a lot of it is in faith, through prayers and hard work, hard dedication, because it's not only through how you plant the seeds out here, you're dealing with the environment, meaning hard days out there, hot days, no moisture. Then when it comes to maturity, a lot of times, you have the ravens or crows that you have to deal with. You have the small rodents when they're still young seedlings. And also now we've also experienced within the last 20, 30 years with the different forest fires that have occurred around our reservation here. A lot of the big game has come upon our lands. You've got deer and elk that have come upon here, and so that's who we're dealing also with today. So it's a huge task that you have to maintain in order to harvest something for your family. Some of the Hopi adopted crops since colonization of the non-natives, non-Hopis that were to introduce some of the different varieties is what we call chili or chili. It comes from the Hispanic word of chili. Some of the fruit trees that we have now maintained out here, the peaches, the pears, plum trees, cherry trees, and so forth that we have out here on the high deserts. The other variety that we have is melons or meloni, and that's how we say it in Hopi. But a lot of them still have a significant part in our daily lives out here. Some of the, especially with the peaches, we consume them and we dry them, pick them and dry them, and that's used a lot into some of the very high ceremonial aspects of it, especially if we're going into something called fasting. That's consumed there because it's not of any high content of grease or meat value. That's something that's good for the body. Something with the meloni or with the melons, that's something that we enjoy during that height of this growing season or the maturity of it, because it's not something that can be kept for a very long time like how the squash or pumpkin or watermelon. The watermelon out here that grows has a very thick rind to it that they call them what they call winter melons, and they can be kept all the way up until like around February. You can still go into your little storage units and break out one watermelon. It may not be like a watermelon that you buy with the whole meat still intact at a grocery store, but it's still melon and it's still edible. So we eat those out here all the way up until about maybe early February. Chili is just something you can eat green, or you dry them and then you consume them throughout the year with your various foods that you do. You can have dried chili as far as you mix it with a little bit of grease, and it's good with eating with your meat products. And with chili, dried chili, you can add to your beans and mix it up, and you have a little bit of what we call chili beans rather than the chili that you find in your supermarkets or other places that you can buy that. But those are some of the introduced crops. Another thing I didn't mention was grapes, which is another part of it that was introduced by the Spaniards. And so we have the same name as what the Hispanics call it. We call it ova, which is grapes, which we consume. And it has also been learned, that we could dry grapes, just like how raisins are. So I remember doing that with our grandfather, who used to dry grapes and peaches a lot. So we have a large bucket of peaches, and even to the point that I guess during famine at one time, I was been told stories that they used to save the seeds from the peaches, and when the peaches, when it got to hard times, they ground up the peaches, the 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 um, the seeds from the peaches, and that's what they used to drink because it was high in protein and mixed in with other blends of like the cornmeal and made it. It was good food that they ate at that time, but I have yet to see anybody do that today. Thank you for allowing me to introduce or give you a little bit of glimpse of what Hopi has experienced throughout their lifetime as far as how we recollect our history. None of our life history is ever written, it's all oral. So everything that I have told you or introduced to you or informed you about is something that has been passed down or I've personally experienced. But a lot of the seeds that we have maintained throughout our lifetime, life history of Hopi is that it's very valuable. It's a valuable content, just like a gold bar would be to somebody that's invested a lot of money into their life savings. Our life savings is the amount of corn that you can harvest because that's what sustains you into the future and every day. We consume corn on a daily basis throughout our meals. It can be made into products such as biki, paper bread, someviki, like the blue tamales, into stews, various type of stews that you can make the white corn hominy out of, and also the white biki and the pudding, all these different kinds of corns that we use for various purposes. Parched corn, which is just like corn nuts, which we can do. It's made out of the pink corn, what we call the konin, and such. And so the ceremonial part of it is always going to be the main importance of it, along with the consumption of it. That's why we made the covenant, the agreement with these creators, saying that we will be your stewards. We will maintain the integrity of what you stand here for, and that is to continue plant up until today. And so all these different varieties of seeds that we utilize today has been with us since time immemorial. And I'm one of those individuals that's been um, indoctrinated into the teachings and the hard way of learning how to plant and maintain your farming out here and planting seeds is something that's very, very important to me and dear to me. And so I try to pass that on, but that's been my mission to pass on to the youth and others that may not have that teachings. And the other part that I always do is I share some of the seeds, the heirloom seeds, with other Hopi farmers that are I know that will make significant use of it or the rightful way that they make the decisions out of it. My seeds are not to be sold on the open market because I don't want no non what they call GMO anything introduced in it because today everything that's out in the modern markets, you got these pesticides and such that's added to those seeds and it contaminates and that destroys the whole line of what we the agreement that I made with the creator. So that's how I look at these seeds as being very, very important to me and my people and how we sustain our lives from thousands of years ago to today and how we farm and generate the agriculture, the products that we harvest usually in late fall in every growing season. But it's very short. It's not something that we have throughout the whole part that we don't have the availability of irrigation. Everything is done within the belief system of you through prayers and through hopes, through our ceremonial part of these uh, contri- contri- contributions from the higher spirits above that bring us the rains and the moisture of the winter months with the snow so that we can have plants throughout the summer months. And with this, I want to thank you all for having listening in to this presentation. If you have any questions and wish to further ask me something, maybe I might be able to answer your questions. You can reach me at the email at my last name, Tenakhongva09 at gmail.com. But I am available to try to answer your questions. I am also a musician that composes songs, and most of my songs, 99% of my songs, is talking about agriculture, the environment, rain, and nature. So I wish you all a blessed day, and may we all live in peace and harmony together, and so that we have a lot of crops so that life can continue. Kwakwai.